Hey, what's up guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Tech and today I'm going to compare the OnePlus 9 Pro versus Huawei P50 Pro. I will give you a complete spec sheet of these both phones, so without further ado, let's get started. So in today's video, we will be comparing the flagship phones of the 2021. The Huawei P50 Pro, also known for the best camera performer phone in this 2021 because it stops the DxO Mark scores, and the OnePlus 9 Pro also have the better camera. So here we compare the two flagship smartphone, that 6.8 inches OnePlus 9 Pro with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 that was released on March 23, 2021 against the Huawei P50 Pro, which is powered by a Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 with 4G and come out 4 months after. On this page we will find a test full specs, strengths and weaknesses of each gadgets. So in today's video I will be comparing these both phones and will come out with some crazy differences, so make sure you watch till the end and make sure you subscribe to my channel for more awesome videos like this. So let's start with the key differences. The reasons to buy the OnePlus 9 Pro is because it shows a 26% better Antutu benchmark, up to 26%, and also have the most recent OS version because they are using Android 12, but the Huawei P50 Pro uses the Android 11. The OnePlus 9 Pro also uses the 17% higher pixel density, 525 versus the 450 ppi density on the Huawei P50 Pro. The OnePlus 9 Pro also supports the reverse charging features and also shows the 8% better performance in single core and the multi-core performances. Now reasons to buy the Huawei P50 Pro. Huawei P50 Pro have the better camera according to DxO Mark rating. Then the rear camera has also 3.5 optical zoom and also can record slow motion at 960 fps and also can record 4K on the front facing camera. And the Huawei P50 Pro also have the infrared port. So that was some key differences on both of this phone. Now let's move on. Now let's talk about the review of these phones. As you guys can see, the 9 Pro and the P50 Pro use the same display, but the 9 Pro have the 94 score. And also they're using the same processor, but the 9 Pro clearly ahead from the P50 Pro, smashing 94% of scores. The battery has been given to the P50 Pro because it comes with a 5000 mAh battery, I think. But the 9 Pro scores 79 and the P50 Pro scores 87%. But the real difference is in this camera because the 9 Pro scores 79% but the P50 Pro scores 86%. And also the connectivity goes to the 94% 9 Pro because it has the 5G. But the P50 Pro doesn't have the 5G because of the US band, so it's only kept to 91%. Now let's talk about the display. The 9 Pro uses the AMOLED, but the P50 Pro uses the OLED. There's no such differences, but the size is 6.7 inches on the 9 Pro, OnePlus 9 Pro, and the 6.6 inches on Huawei P50 Pro. But the 9 Pro offers a Quad HD Plus resolution, but the P50 Pro offers a Full HD Plus resolution, I think. And their aspect ratio are both the same, but the PPI density on the OnePlus 9 Pro is clearly ahead from the Huawei P50 Pro, smashing 525 in PPI density, and the P50 Pro only uses the 450 PPI density. They both have the high refresh rate of 120Hz, but OnePlus 9 Pro screen protected by Gorilla Glass 5 with the P50 Pro protected by tempered glass. Screen to body ratio also goes to the P50 Pro because it's 91%, but the 9 Pro have the 93%. Now move on. Now let's talk about the design and build. As you guys can see on the screen right now, their height, weight, thickness and weight have not the same but a little difference, but they are both IP68 waterproof and dust resistant, and their rear material is made from glass, frame material are made from metal, and their colors are also white, black and green. But the P50 Pro use 4 colors: white, black, gold, blue and pink. And they both phones use the in-display fingerprint sensor. The screen to body ratio goes to P50 Pro only 1%. Now let's talk about the performance. The Huawei P50 Pro and the OnePlus 9 Pro uses the same processor, but the Huawei P50 Pro kept on Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 4G because they are using the 4G modem instead of 5G modem. But there is no such difference in their Snapdragon. But there is no such difference in the performance because they are using the same CPU. So let's move on. Now let's talk about its RAM size. The RAM size of both phones have similar RAM size, and they are using the LPDDR5 RAM and a memory clock of 2750 MHz. But the OnePlus 9 Pro uses this 4-channel of RAM instead of 2-channel on the P50 Pro. The storage size is increased on the P50 Pro. They are using the 512 GB of peak variant, and the OnePlus 9 Pro only uses the 256 of GB of peak variant. The storage type is also UFS 3.1, but the P50 Pro can support the memory card slot of the nano memory. Now let's talk about its benchmarks. As you guys can see, the 9 Pro is clearly ahead, plus 9% from the P50 Pro using the Snapdragon 888 chipset. But in the multi-core, they're both using the same processor, but in multi-core, the P50 Pro only gains up to 1% in performance boost. But in N2 benchmark, the 9 Pro smashes the P50 Pro in performance in N2 benchmark. As you guys can see on the screen right now, the P50 Pro is clearly down by 26%, gaining 9 Pro up to 26% in performance. As you guys can see on the screen right now, the P50 Pro using the same processor and the 9 Pro also uses the same processor, but you guys can see the performance difference in these both phones. The GPU performance gained 292,659 on the OnePlus 9 Pro, but on the P50 Pro it only have 185,953. That is some crazy numbers down ahead. So let's move on to next. Now let's talk about the software. The OnePlus 9 Pro uses the 12 Android 12, but the P50 Pro uses the Android 11. So the OnePlus 9 Pro uses the recent operating system. Now let's talk about the ROM. They both have their own custom ROM. The OnePlus 9 Pro uses the Oxygen OS 12, but the P50 Pro uses the Harmony OS 2.0. That's their own operating system. Now let's talk about its battery. They both have the similar battery capacity and also have the similar charge power and also can charge wirelessly up to 50 watt. But the OnePlus 9 Pro can support reverse charging. And also the full charging time of OnePlus 9 Pro have in 32 minutes because it is 4500 mAh battery. But on the P50 Pro though, the charging speed is very fast because of its battery capacity that is 4360 mAh battery. So the OnePlus 9 Pro can charge in 22 minutes fully. So that was some specs from the. Alright guys, the moment you all have been waiting is to see the difference between their cameras, because the P50 Pro outcomes the OnePlus 9 Pro in cameras. Now let's talk about the cameras. As you guys can see, the main matrix camera, the OnePlus 9 Pro uses the 48 megapixel camera, but the Huawei P50 Pro gains in camera because they are using the 50 megapixel instead of 48 megapixel. And the zoom also goes to the P50 Pro because they are using the 3.5 time optical zoom instead of 3.3. Now let's talk about the zoom. The OnePlus 9 Pro have the 3.5 times optical zoom instead of 3.3 on the P50 Pro. Now let's talk about the zoom. As you guys can see on the screen right now, the Huawei P50 Pro outcomes in zoom because they are using the 3.5 times instead of 3.3 on the OnePlus 9 Pro. And also you guys can see there is no 8K support on the P50 Pro, but 8K up to 30 FPS supports on the OnePlus 9 Pro. So also the plus point for the OnePlus. But as you guys can see on the screen right now, the OnePlus 9 Pro also supports 4K up to 60 FPS, and P50 Pro also supports that. But the clear difference comes in the slow motion videos, because P50 Pro can support 960 FPS and 1080p, but the slow motion support on OnePlus 9 Pro supports only 1080p on 240 FPS. So that's the plus point for the P50 Pro, because it's using the Snapdragon 888 chipset with a 50 megapixel camera and results better camera result on the DxO Mark. Now let's talk about the camera lenses. So OnePlus 9 Pro uses the 48 megapixel sensor that is a Sony IMX789. That is the best sensor I've ever known. But the Huawei P50 Pro uses the 50 megapixel sensor with a 23mm focal length, and also named OmniVision OV50A. They both have laser autofocus and optical image stabilization, but in telephoto, the Huawei P50 Pro uses a 64 megapixel of telephoto lens, that is the focal length of 90mm, and the telephoto lens on the OnePlus 9 Pro is only 8 megapixels. So in telephoto lenses, the Huawei P50 Pro will gain more performance because of their pixel size, because they are using the 64 megapixel camera. The 64 megapixel camera telephoto lens is OmniVision OV64B, and the telephoto lens on the OnePlus 9 Pro is using OmniVision OV08A10. They also have the phase autofocus and optical image stabilization. But in the ultra wide, the OnePlus 9 Pro smashes because they are using the 50 megapixel camera, that is Sony IMX766, the best camera sensor I've ever known in the ultra wide lenses. But in P50 Pro, they are using the 13 megapixel OmniVision OV13B10. And the rest, and also the Huawei P50 Pro uses the 40 megapixel camera that is only monochrome lens, means black and white lens. That is also 40 megapixel, and that is also OmniVision OV40A. But the Huawei P50 Pro also have the monochrome lens. I'm very amazed to see that they are using the monochrome lens up to 40 megapixel, and also have the aperture of 1.6. Wow. The OnePlus 9 Pro also uses the 2 megapixel depth sensor. No one talk about it. Sorry. The camera features bokeh mode, Pro mode, and RAW support from both phones. Now let's move on to the selfie camera. The selfie camera, the OnePlus 9 Pro uses a 16 megapixel selfie camera and also have the better image resolution, but no support of 4K. But the P50 Pro uses the 13 megapixel camera but can support 4K up to 30 FPS. So that's the plus point for the OnePlus. So that's the plus point for the P50 Pro, and also winning in the selfie camera because they are using 13 megapixel but can record 4K up to 30 FPS. Now let's talk about its connectivity. They're both using the Wi-Fi 6 with the Bluetooth version of 5.2, and also have the USB Type-C generation 3.1, and also can support many features. They both have a similar connectivity. Now let's move on. Now let's talk about the network. They're both using the 2SIM nano technology, but there is no 5G support on Huawei P50 Pro. No, because of the US ban, the Huawei P50 Pro does not support the 5G network, and also does not support the LTE Cat 24. But the OnePlus 9 Pro have the 5G support and also can support LTE Cat up to 24. There is no 3.5mm headphone jack on both phones because they are flagship phones, but they do support the Dolby Atmos technology for the better sound performance. As you guys can see on the screen right now, the Huawei P50 Pro was announced on July 2021, while the OnePlus 9 Pro was announced on March 2021. But the Huawei P50 Pro was released on August 2021, but the release date of the Huawei P50 Pro ahead from the release date of OnePlus 9 Pro because that was launched on March 2021. So that was some crazy details of both phones. If you like this video, then sub to the channel Huawei, and make sure you subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon to never miss an updates. Thank you for watching. It's Tech, and see you in the next video.